She comes from a place of compassion. She's moved through the fields of fear. She's grown her confidence, and it is contagious. She didn't listen to the naysayers. Her name is Dr. Drema Dial, and that makes her unstoppable. I'm going to go to something that's personal, and I try to coach this every day. The importance of ego in the equation, and the importance of as for people to leave ego at the door, especially for leadership. You've got to leave your ego at the door. And I once read that a military figure, Colin Powell, one of our military men, said that ego, if you tie your ego to a position, you lose the position, your ego goes with it. So I'm very careful not to assign today's successes, whatever they may be, as a winner or a failure, so to say, even if it's a loss. But I don't want to attach my ego to my title, to my cars, to my house. So I want to find another place to do the work inside where it's without the ego. So more ego, less if I can. How big of a hurdle do you have overcoming people's ego?
Oh, huge, huge. Because I think most of us, in American culture, it's the first thing that an American will ask you is, what do you do for a living, right? So we immediately attach your importance, your ego to, what do you do? In France, you might know somebody for 10 years before they ever ask what you do for a living. It's not important. And so ego for Americans is huge, and learning to set it aside is huge. And so it really has to be, it's that whole progress, not perfection sort of thing. Mm. And so I always ask people, what's something that you like to do as a kid? And the answers are many. It could be anything from, well, I used to have a scooter to I used to paint. And I ask them to go and do that thing, which knocks people out of their comfort zone totally. I mean, you want to see a 50-year-old man trying to hula hoop? It's great, because you got to put your ego aside. In order to be present, in order to enjoy yourself, you got to put your ego aside.
And, some of the best creativity for Jung, when he split from Freud, I have read, is when he went home and played in the sandbox. Just went back to that childlike wonder of things that inspired that whole wellspring of creativity. And when I visit France, I notice that people have a certain way. There's a certain style. There's what they call insouciance to a certain degree, right, in France. And they're on the sidewalk cafes, and it's 3-hour lunches, and things just move at a certain pace. And over here, we're running to our next heart attack. And I do a lot of business. I live in Southern California, do a lot of business in New York. And it's always a frenetic race, just like those rats through a maze to try to get somewhere. When you tell me where somewhere is, let me know so I can stop and enjoy it. Maybe France, I'm not sure. Through life, you've had your challenges. Wouldn't cross the street because you didn't want to make eye contact and have to talk, or someone would look down and you'd feel shame. What's your biggest failure, and what did you learn from
it? That's a good question. My first association, so I'll just go with that. My first association is I failed at my first marriage. It ended in divorce. But the reality is it was the right decision. It just felt like a failure because you enter a marriage expecting it to last. Was it a failure from where I sit now? No. I've had lots of other failures, trying different business ventures, going, wow, I just lost a lot of money there because I wasn't thoughtful. I was impulsive. I failed at becoming a professor because along the line, I discovered it wasn't important to me, but people saw that as a failure. It's like, well, you're a tenure track professor. What happened? Didn't want it. So failure for me is I tried. I put myself out there. I did something and it didn't work. Sometimes the reasons why it didn't work don't matter, and sometimes we really have a lesson to learn there. But I would tell you that these days I embrace failure because it says to me I'm not stagnant. I'm doing something.
That's right. You're going to help me promote my new book. So
right.
Fail More.
Fail More. I love that.
I don't think anybody would buy it. So
no, but Fail More.
Thank you. It's marketing genius, isn't it? Really. So
yes.
the other side of that the shiny coin really is success. So how do you define success in your life?
Oh, I used to think it was going to be hitting a certain income, driving the car, having the house, but that wasn't it. Because all of those things, they don't hit here. It's like when you go and you buy something shiny and wonderful, you get your Rolex and you're like, yeah, feels really good, but it's transitory.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, success has really boiled down to, am I happy doing what I do?
Those that are jaded, maybe those that are not the unwashed in the audience, not literally, but would say, okay, Dr. Dial, I get it, but I got to pay bills. I don't love my job, but I'm making a shit ton of money and I got to keep doing it. I can't have that. I don't have that form of happiness, but I'm able to support my family, so I'm making a sacrifice. What do you tell that person?
I tell that person that's perfectly fine for you to go and do your job and make your money. But where are you finding happiness in your life? Happiness doesn't come just from our jobs. We spend a lot of time at our jobs, so it's great if we can love it. But if it's providing you with the other things that you need, then what you need to do is flesh out, find some balance, and do things you love. Do things with your family. Have a bike that you love. Go on hikes. Do things that you love so that you have a balance to going to your job. That's all that means. It doesn't mean you have to give up your wealth. It does not mean you have to change your jobs. It doesn't mean that. It means you find it within. You find it within. What brings you joy?
Yes.
What brings you joy?
That's a great point. Me?
Yeah.
Doing this. We're just doing this. Engaging with people, just like I'm doing with you.
Okay, good.
Learning from people, being open to learning, being on the quest for more knowledge, being on the quest and being open to the experience. See, that's the key, is being open to the experience.
There you go. I like that.
Not judgmental, open to the experience. And I want to tell you something. You've proven to me that you really are in France because you mentioned bikes. There's only two places where bikes exist in massive numbers: Southern California and France. You really are there.
Right.
Loaf of bread in the front, and there you go down the road, right? Life is good. What is, you can only pick one out of this candy box. Now you got me rolling. What is your defining moment?
Defining moment. I'm going to go with the first thing that came up, and I've talked about this before. I have a podcast, and I've talked about this before there. I was at the library. I was first year in my graduate studies. I had a stack full of books. I'll never forget this. Stack full of books. And I look down as I'm waiting in line and see the library schedule. That should not be very notable, right? Except one thing. I noticed that the library was closed on Sundays. And my husband had been telling me for months that he was going to the library every Sunday. So what I realized in that moment was everything was a lie. But I had this moment of clarity that I will never forget. It was like I saw two futures in front of me. One is I could be the wife, the victim. I could stay in a marriage that had already pretty much run its course. I could stay quiet, in other words. Or I could do the really scary thing, take my kids and create a life for myself. Those two things were so crystal clear. And I did the scary thing. I went to a phone and called and said it's over and never looked back. That was a pretty defining moment, because what I realized I was telling myself there was it was okay for me to make choices about my life, to become proactive in my life, and to stop being reactive, to stop being passive in my own life. That was pretty huge.
I want to give you a virtual hug, so I hope you can feel it. That's
Thank
powerful.
you.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's a great takeaway. When you can see two futures in front of you, when you can call it, when you can do the scary thing, the right thing, that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's, so now I really want to find you one more time. Where do we find you?
Find me at DremaDial.com. You can also find me in France, because I am beginning this year. I am doing retreats and business planning. We're meeting in Paris. We're meeting in Provence. So come on over to France. DremaDial.com is where you'll find all of the information you need.
Let me ask you a question that's something out of the ordinary on this show, but what do you think the keys to whatever the word success means? I don't know if that word is applicable in marriage, but what do you think the keys are to a marriage that works?
Mutuality, reciprocity. I think it's really about, communication is so key. And if both people, if neither person, if one person doesn't feel able to be their true self, doesn't feel able to be vulnerable, feels like they have to hold things back, it doesn't work. When people learn to be vulnerable, show their warts, be okay with it, everything changes. And that's what's happened for me. I mean, when I made that decision years ago, I had to go through a lot of transformation, a lot of work on myself to get to a point where I believed I deserved that. And what I have now is fabulous. Wouldn't trade for the world. I live in the south of France with the love of my life. I mean, how good is that?
Wow.
Because I learned along the way to reveal myself, to build up my confidence, to be okay with being vulnerable. And I attracted that into my life as well. When we do the work, it pays off.
As I listen to you, I am a huge believer in, I think you're different than other life coaches, other people that say they're life coaches. I think that the term actually doesn't do justice to what you do, because I think you continue to live the experience that you coach. You have the credibility from a background, a platform that's real, that you paid for in terms of not only the monetary part, but
Right.
the time in the chair to do it.
Yeah.
You're able to see yourself with a certain clarity. You know, we all look in and say we have honest introspection. That's an oxymoron. No such thing, because we're the subjective form trying to look in. But you see things with clarity. And I think that's the key to moving ahead and becoming unstoppable. You got to see it. You can't deny its damn existence, and you have a choice.
Yeah. We all have a choice. Every day we have thousands of choices. And once you're aware of those things, you can make the choice you need to make to move yourself forward. And yeah, it's scary. And I always tell people, I think one of the biggest differences is I hear a lot of people say, well, do it anyhow. And I'm like, hold on. If you don't acknowledge that fear is going to leak out in other parts of your life.
It's good.
You got to acknowledge the fear. You got to tell yourself, okay, I am afraid of failing. I'm afraid of looking like a fool. And you go, and then you work on doing it. That's when everything changes.
I have 60,000 more questions and about 60 seconds to get through it. So I'm going to have you back on the show, if you'd be so kind as to come back on.
Okay, yes.
You a bountiful form of a tremendous plethora of knowledge, and you have a wisdom behind it and a compassion I can feel. But I got to ask you this. If you could write a paragraph for others to learn from, to gain something from, so you shorten that distance from where they are and where they're going, or where they intend to go, and lessen the pain, okay, what would that paragraph look like in a rough form?
I would say it really starts with how you think about things. It starts with how you consider where you are in the midst of your own life, and believing that you can will be the most powerful thing that you can ever do. Because we don't know if we can, but if we believe we can, we find ways to make it happen. And if you can be okay with failing more, then you're going to be okay with success, because you're going to be prepared for it. Yeah.
Wow. Love you. I'm going to circle that. Stay on the air. Dr. Drema Dial, you were fantastic. And if you don't check her out, you are remiss. That means you're missing it. Bill Woodage, until next time, be unstoppable.